So if you can't beat Russia in Ukraine, and if you can't reindustrialize, then what can you do to protect the petrodollar and your financial system? Well, I have an idea, okay? Invade Iran, okay? Invade Iran. Now, why would you do that? And the answer is that, unfortunately, of all the options out there, okay, because America can't just sit back and let its empire collapse, right? Of all the options out there, invading Iran happens to be politically the easiest to do, okay? You can't go fight a war against Russia because Russia has nuclear weapons. You cannot reindustrialize because there'll be too much political opposition towards that. Plus, it'll take you about 50 years to reindustrialize. But if you invade Iran, well, you accomplish three things, okay? The first thing is you show the world that you're still the top dog. Your military is still invincible, okay? So if you're a foreign investor in America, you have $1 trillion US, you feel safe, okay? You don't think the US dollar will collapse. Okay? That's the first thing. To show the world that America is still the world's foremost military power, therefore the US dollar is safe, okay? Second is oil, right? What is the US dollar based on? Oil, right? Well, if you control oil, then you don't have to worry about people abandoning the US dollar. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, and it happens that the Middle East produces 40% of the world's oil. And Iran is the world's fourth largest oil exporter. But when you take over Iran, you also control Iraq as well. You control that entire area, okay? And the third thing about invading Iran is trade, okay? So that area, most of the world's trade has to pass through that area, right? So invading Iran would allow you to control the world's shipping lanes, okay? So that would be the theory behind invading Iran, okay? But the motivation would be to save the American empire. Because if Putin wins in Ukraine, then America is going to look weak. It's going to look like a paper tiger, okay? And in this situation, as the empire, you have to act. Today, you have a lot of countries in Africa who are rebelling against the Western powers, France, basically, and America. Why? Because they think that Putin is now in charge, okay? Why did October 7th, why did Hamas attack Israel? I guarantee you that if it were not for the war in Ukraine, Hamas would not have done such a thing, okay? For the longest time before the war in Ukraine, there was a perception in the world that America was militarily invincible. No power, no country could ever dare stand up against the United States. And by invading Ukraine, Putin has proved everyone wrong, okay? That the United States can be defeated. And so what the United States must do now is prove to the world, nope, we're still militarily the greatest power in the world. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? And again, it must do so to protect its financial economy. Otherwise, there's a very good chance that this financial economy will implode onto itself. Okay? If China, Japan, other countries pull out of the U.S. financial sector, okay? If they sell their U.S. treasuries, not only will America face a sovereign debt crisis, but it will lose access to easy money, okay? Easy money. And the problem in America today is that America is an empire addicted to easy money, okay? People are so used to just sitting around and making millions of dollars that they cannot imagine or tolerate a day when they would have to go back to working hard. Okay? So it's this addiction to easy money which will drive America to invade Iran. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, any questions? Okay, so all this money coming to America, how is it managed? Okay, so this is actually very complicated, okay? Because again, the financial sector is very large. But if you have US dollars, then your options are you can invest in the stock market, you can invest in houses, okay? The problem today is because there are too many rich people in the world, and all this money is going to America, all assets are bubbles now, okay? So the irony of all this is that you feel that your only option is to invest in America, but when you do this, you're actually losing value, okay? And that's why the system is not really sustainable. Everyone's going to America, and that's driving up all these asset prices, but in the long term, that will destroy the American economy. In the long term, it'll create all these bubbles that will also destroy individual wealth, okay? Does that make sense? Any more questions?
So, like, if America loses the war in Iran, like, then, like, other countries will lose even more confidence in America, so their system will, like, completely fall apart.
Okay, so Jack asked a great question, which is like, listen, if going to Iran is all about restoring confidence in the United States, well, if America loses the war, then that would destroy even more confidence, okay? And so this is the problem of empires. Empires have something called hubris, right? Imperial hubris. Which means that they cannot imagine the possibility of losing a war, okay? So why is that? Okay, there are two reasons, okay? There are two reasons. The first reason is that what an empire is, it's a force that imposes reality onto others, okay? An empire makes you see the world the way the empire wants you to see the world. Okay, does that make sense? Which means there's no feedback loop, which means that you cannot actually tell the empire what you think. Your voice doesn't matter. Which means that an empire, it's not possible for an empire to imagine the possibility of it ever collapsing. Do you understand? If it could, it would never collapse. Okay, that's the first problem. Second problem is that, okay, let's do a thought experiment. If you had a choice, would you rather be smart and strategic or stupid and arrogant? If you had a choice in an ideal world, would you rather be smart and strategic or stupid and arrogant? Okay, the answer is stupid and arrogant because it makes you feel good, okay? Stupid people feel good about themselves, right? Smart people get depressed. They doubt themselves. They question themselves, and that makes you feel bad. Most people in an ideal world would want to feel good about themselves always, okay? So when you are an empire, you want to be stupid and arrogant because it makes you feel good. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? But that's why empires collapse, because once they have too much power, they become stupid and arrogant. And they refuse to consider the possibility that they could be wrong. Okay? Does that make sense, Jack? Okay? Any more questions?
So did the empire start when they start to trade with the world or when the bubble started?
Okay, the American empire has been building for a long time. Okay, so you can make the argument that the empire really started after World War II, because now America controlled half the world. And then it became dominant after the end of the Cold War when the Soviet Union collapsed. And at that time, okay, before the collapse of the Cold War, America had to behave itself. And the reason it had to behave itself was it wasn't afraid of the Soviet Union, it was afraid of communism, right? That's why from 1950 to 1980, they treated their workers so well, because they were afraid of a worker revolt, right? So the real threat was not the Soviet Union. The real threat was communism as an opposing ideology to capitalism. Unfortunately, today, there's no opposing ideology towards capitalism, okay? And that's why America can do what it wants. It does not fear any enemies. It does not fear internal revolt. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, all right. So I'll see you guys next week.